audience. It's the same thing with the word toxic masculinity, for example, where someone
Mm,
such as Tate will, disavow that or push back on that. And this isn't defensive of him, but it's more or less why like popularity can rise in this vacuum. But if you
mm,
push back on that, Tate is, and then you have people on the left and others pushing, leaning into that term. And the Center for Male Psychology found that 85% of men believe that term is actually harmful to boys.
mm.
It's like you're not even listening to the men that and boys you're supposed to be helping from people on the
Yeah.
left. You're just like force feeding this term that no one appears to like, but is so often deployed in conversation and in these spaces.
That it's also worth adding to that poll you mentioned from the Centre of Male Psychology that
Hmm.
found, I think it's about 88% of men polled found that term insulting and unhelpful and
Hmm.
damaging to boys, especially, but also women. Very similar amount of women felt the same. It's not just men that hate it.
Oh,
Women hate
interesting.
it. Women hate it too. Like we all hate it.
Huh.
No other demographic group would we accept assigning the term toxic. Like it wouldn't. I don't even want to give examples because it's so offensive
Hmm.
and stupid. But I don't understand why we can call masculinity toxic, and yet no other demographic group can be called toxic. Because like, are we not? Can we not afford the same respect and compassion, dignity to men as we give to everyone else? And I don't. Yeah, I hate the term toxic masculinity. I feel like it pathologizes an innate part of men. I don't think masculinity is toxic. I think there are certainly toxic attitudes towards masculinity that hurt men and boys in the same way as they hurt women and girls, but masculinity in itself isn't toxic. And it's like it's a shame because we should have learned this lesson before because about 100 years ago there's this concept called female hysteria where women's distress was pathologized as something wrong in her and she was called hysterical, so female
Hmm.
hysteria, and it was seen as like a medical problem to be treated. And now I feel like toxic masculinity is just a modern equivalent of female hysteria, and it's being followed by and apparently treated by the same corrective therapies. And it's like we've not learned we've not learned, and we should stop pathologizing masculinity and stop pretending like men have something wrong inside of them because they don't.
That's a great comparison.
Mm,
Absolutely fantastic comparison because it puts it in this unfair light where you're on the backbone. I mean, I
mm,
heard this from like Douglas Murray before in like a recent book of his, but it's like it's so much easier to burn down a house than it is to build it. And it's just easy to take certain aspects that certain men exhibit and be like, oh, that represents this thing called toxic masculinity. I'm sure it's the same thing to do on the other side as well, but both are equally as unhelpful as the other, and
mm.
kind of making any progress that your, vision or your mission may claim to want to do or achieve.
It doesn't identify any
Hmm.
actual tangible symptoms that can be treated. Like male depression, for example, is a useful term because that's something that we know what it is. We can discuss it in quite detail and we can get it treated. Toxic masculinity, I don't know what you're talking about. Everyone has their own definition. And that's why we have this strange phenomenon where everything seems to be being blamed on toxic masculinity. So like gang culture, knife crime, Donald Trump's election, all toxic masculinity. But then again, so are climate change, not recycling, Brexit, the climate crisis, the
Hmm.
financial crash of 2008. I've seen things like meat eating, women not having pockets. They're all caused by toxic masculinity. And I'm like, I don't understand how something that causes gang violence can also cause men not recycling. I don't get that. And that's because the
Hmm.
concept itself has no meaning. It's completely vague. And like studies that have examined toxic masculinity, they've looked at studies that use that term, and they found out about half of studies that talk about toxic masculinity don't even define what it is. So it's like I don't. It doesn't mean anything to me. It just, in my opinion, it just basically tries to attach men to bad things. Tries to make does men look bad by association. Like this is men, this is men, this is men, and
Hmm.
that's what it's trying to do. And in that way, it's very effective. But it's
There
just trying to associate men with bad things.